One message, 1 second, one truth that shattered everything she thought she knew. Lalisa Smith had exactly 43 minutes of pure happiness before her entire world collapsed. She remembered the number precisely, 43 minutes, because she had glanced at the clock on the kitchen wall when Daniel walked through the front door of their Alexandria, Virginia home, arms full of grocery bags and smelling like the cold November air. She had been standing at the counter, humming to herself, wrapped in the ridiculous oversized sweater Daniel had bought her last Christmas, the one with the little embroidered snowflakes that she pretended to hate but secretly wore every single weekend. She was happy, genuinely, completely, embarrassingly happy, the kind of happy you only feel when you aren't watching for it. "You're in a good mood," Daniel said, dropping the bags on the counter and kissing the side of her head. "I got the promotion," she said, turning to him with a grin so wide it almost hurt. "Effective January, full section chief. I'm running the entire intelligence analysis division." Daniel pulled back and looked at her, really looked at her, and his face broke into a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes the way it always did when he was genuinely proud of her. Not the polished, handsome smile he gave at Pentagon briefings and duty receptions. The real one, the private one. "You deserve it," he said. "You've worked for this for 6 years. 7, she corrected. 7, he kissed her again, properly this time, and she pressed her hands flat against his chest and let herself feel, just for a moment, like everything was exactly right. That was the 43 minutes. Because at 6:17 p.m. his phone buzzed on the counter where he'd left it, and the screen lit up, and she saw it, not because she was snooping, not because she had any reason to look. She saw it because she was standing right there, reaching past it to grab the olive oil, and the message was simply there, glowing up at her like a small, patient bomb. "It's done, target confirmed, she can never find out." "Ah." Lalisa set the olive oil down. She stood very still for exactly 4 seconds. Then she picked up the phone. The thing about working in military intelligence for 7 years, the thing nobody outside the windowless classified rooms of Fort Meade and the Defense Intelligence Agency ever really understood, was that your brain never fully turned off. Not at dinner parties, not on vacation, not in your own kitchen on a Tuesday evening with pasta water starting to boil. Pattern recognition was reflexive, threat assessment was automatic, and Lalisa Smith's brain, in the 4 seconds between reading that message and picking up that phone, had already begun building a file. "It's done, task completed, operational language. Target confirmed, military or intelligence framing, not civilian, not personal." She can never find out. The she was specific, present and relevant, someone in proximity to whoever sent this. One initial, deliberate brevity, compartmentalization. She scrolled up. The conversation was 3 weeks old, and it was short, less than 20 messages, but each one landed in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. "The asset is in position, 3 weeks to deployment. She's getting closer to the promotion. Timing is critical. Confirm the intercept holds. We cannot afford exposure at this level." "Understood, she trusts you completely. That's our best advantage." Lalisa put the phone down on the counter. She turned off the burner under the pasta water. She walked to the living room window and looked out at the street, the quiet, tree-lined street in Alexandria where they had lived for 4 years, where the neighbors waved from driveways and left holiday cards in mailboxes and knew nothing, absolutely nothing, about what happened inside the buildings their neighbors worked in, and she breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. "She trusts you completely. That's our best advantage." She is me, Lalisa thought. She has always been me. She did not confront him that night. This was not weakness, this was training. 7 years in intelligence analysis had taught her one immovable truth. The moment you reveal what you know, you surrender every advantage you have. Confirmation without confrontation. Intelligence before action. You never show your cards until you know what game you're playing. So she put pasta on the table and poured wine, and sat across from the man she had loved for 6 years. The man she had built a life with, the man whose middle name she knew was Arthur, and whose deepest fear was disappointing his father, and who cried exactly once, silently, at the end of Interstellar, and she smiled. She smiled and asked him about his day, and listened to him talk about a budget meeting at the Pentagon, and she watched his eyes and his hands, and the micro-expressions that flickered across his face, the way she had been trained to watch sources in interrogation rooms, and she catalogued everything. He was relaxed, comfortable, completely unsuspicious, which meant he was either innocent or extraordinarily well-trained. Given what she'd read, she was no longer betting on innocent. That night when Daniel fell asleep, Lalisa lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and did what she was best at. She thought. She built a timeline. She identified what she knew, what she suspected, and what she needed to confirm. She thought about one initial, operational brevity, someone Daniel trusted enough to use casual language with, someone who knew about her promotion, someone embedded deeply enough in whatever this was to talk about assets and intercepts and deployment windows. She thought about who had access to that information. She thought about the promotion she'd just received, full Section Chief, Intelligence Analysis Division, and what that position would give her access to. What files, what operations, what classified programs that were currently above her clearance level but would not be come January. And then she thought about something that made her go very, very cold. What if the promotion wasn't a reward? What if it was a setup? She called her brother at 6 a.m. Marcus Smith was not a man you called with problems. He was a man you called with situations because Marcus, unlike most people in Lalisa's life, understood the difference. He was 10 years older than her, retired Army Special Forces, and currently consulting for a private defense contractor that Lalisa had enough clearance to know was significantly less private than its LinkedIn profile suggested. "I need to meet," she said when he picked up. A pause. "How bad?" "I don't know yet, that's the problem." "Where's?" "Rock Creek, the usual trail." 2 hours. She left a note for Daniel saying she was going for a run. She drove to Rock Creek Park in the blue-grey November dawn and met her brother at a bend in the trail where the trees were thick enough and the jogger traffic light enough that you could speak without being overheard. She told him everything, the message, the conversation thread, the timeline she'd built in her head in the dark. Marcus listened without interrupting. This was another thing she valued about him. He had the rare, military-trained ability to actually listen, to absorb information without the anxious impulse to respond before someone was finished. When she was done, he was quiet for a long moment. "You know what this sounds like," he said finally. "I know exactly what it sounds like. Human operation. Long game. Someone's been running Daniel as an asset, or Daniel has been running you as one." "Or both," Lalisa said. "Or neither, and I'm reading this completely wrong. Which is why I'm standing in a park at 6 in the morning instead of already having called the FBI." Marcus looked at her. "What do you need?" "I need to find R." It took her 11 days. 11 days of the most grueling, careful, methodical intelligence work she had ever done, and she had spent 4 months untangling a North Korean cyber infiltration of a naval contractor's personnel files. This was harder because this time the target knew her face, knew her name, knew potentially exactly how she thought. She pulled every thread carefully. She did not access classified systems. She couldn't, not without triggering audit logs that could blow back on her. She worked from open sources, from memory, from the professional network she had spent 7 years building, and from 3 careful, oblique conversations with colleagues she trusted completely. R turned out to be a woman named Rebecca Hartwell. Deputy Director Rebecca Hartwell, to be precise. 22 years in defense intelligence, brilliant record, 2 commendations from the Secretary of Defense, and Lalisa discovered through a source she had cultivated over 3 years, a quiet, methodical archivist named George who had access to records most people forgot existed, a classified tie to a program called COULDN that had been buried in a black budget allocation 6 years ago. 6 years ago, the same year Lalisa had started dating Daniel. The same year Daniel had taken a new position that brought him into regular contact with Rebecca Hartwell's division. Lalisa sat in her car in the parking garage of her office building and felt the shape of the things settle around her like a net she hadn't felt closing. This wasn't a betrayal born of passion or weakness or greed. This was architecture. Someone had designed this, designed her life, the contours of it, who she loved and who she worked for and who she trusted as an operational structure. A long-game intelligence operation, patient and precise, designed to put her exactly where she was now. section chief of the Intelligence Analysis Division, with access to programs that someone somewhere desperately wanted access to. She was the target. She had always been the target. And Daniel, with his real smile and his Christmas sweater, and the way he cried at Interstellar, Daniel was either a victim of the same architecture or its most elegant component. She had to know which one. She chose a Sunday. She made breakfast, his favorite, eggs Benedict, the hollandaise from scratch, and she set it on the table and poured coffee and sat across from him and watched him eat and smile and ask if she wanted the style section of the paper. Then she said quietly and without preamble, "Tell me about Rebecca Hartwell." The fork stopped halfway to his mouth. It was 3/4 of a second, less than a second, before his expression shifted back to neutral. But she had been watching for exactly that pause, and she saw it, and that pause told her everything. "I work with her occasionally," he said. "Do liaison stuff. Why?" "Because I found the messages, Daniel." Silence. The November light came through the kitchen window and lay across the table between them, and Daniel set his fork down slowly, and she watched his face go through something she had never seen on it before, a kind of unraveling, like a man who has been holding a very heavy thing for a very long time and has just been told he can set it down. "How much do you know?" he asked. "Enough to have already filed a report," she said. "I didn't, but I could have. I need you to understand that the only reason I'm sitting here instead of watching federal agents walk you out of this house is because I needed to know if you did this willingly." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "I didn't." And then he told her everything. Rebecca Hartwell had approached Daniel 14 months into their relationship, not with a threat, with a request. A quiet, reasonable, professionally framed request from a senior official to a mid-level duty officer. Maintain the relationship, report on Lalisa's professional movements, flag when her clearance level changed or her access expanded. "She told me it was a routine security assessment," Daniel said. His voice was steady, but his hands were flat on the table, pressed down, the way you press down on something to keep it from shaking. "She said you were being considered for a classified program and they needed to vet your personal life without your knowledge. She said it was standard." "And you believed her?" "For about 4 months." He looked at her. "And then I started asking questions she didn't like, and she told me very calmly, very professionally, that I had already participated long enough to be implicated, and that my best option was to continue cooperating." "Blackmail, clean institutional blackmail." "The message," Lalisa said. "It's done, target confirmed." Daniel closed his eyes. "She wanted confirmation that you'd accepted the promotion, that you hadn't declined it or requested a different posting, that you were going to be exactly where she needed you to become January." "What's in January, Daniel?" He opened his eyes. "A program called COULDN runs a second phase authorization in January," he said. "It requires dual sign-off from the section chief of Intelligence Analysis and one other official. Hartwell is the other official. She's been waiting 6 years for someone she controlled to be in that chair." Lalisa felt the room settle into absolute clarity around her. "She doesn't control me," she said. "I know," Daniel said. "That's why I sent that message myself. I told her it was done because I needed her to stop watching you long enough for me to figure out how to get us both out of this." "Ah," Lalisa said slowly, "the initial, that's you." "My middle name's Arthur." His middle name was Arthur. She had always known it. She had just never had reason to use it as a data point before. She sat with that for a long moment. Then she said, "I need you to set up a meeting with Hartwell. Tell her the target is confirmed and you want to discuss next steps. Tell her whatever she needs to hear to get her in a room." Daniel looked at her. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "My job," Lalisa said. The meeting happened in a conference room in a building that, officially, did not exist on any federal registry. Lalisa was already seated when Rebecca Hartwell walked in. Hartwell was exactly as she had imagined, composed, impeccably dressed, the kind of woman who wore authority like a second skin. She stopped when she saw Lalisa, a fractional hesitation, rapid reassessment behind careful eyes. "Ms. Smith," she said. "Deputy Director," Lalisa gestured to the chair across the table. "Please sit." Hartwell sat. Her composure was extraordinary. Lalisa respected it professionally, even as she prepared to dismantle everything behind it. You should know, Lalisa said, that everything you've sent and received in relation to Cardinal and to Daniel has been documented, verified, and is currently sitting in a file with the DoD Inspector General's office. It was delivered this morning. A silence. That's a significant allegation, Hartwell said. It's not an allegation, it's a summary of evidence. Lalisa opened the folder in front of her and slid a single page across the table. I've spent 7 years learning how people build operations designed to be invisible. I know what invisible looks like. Yours wasn't. Hartwell looked at the page. Something moved behind her eyes. You could have gone to the FBI, she said almost to herself. I went somewhere better, Lalisa said. I went to the people who know where every body is buried in this building because I've spent 7 years helping them find the bodies. She leaned forward slightly. Cardinal is over, Deputy Director. Whatever you were planning to authorize in January isn't happening. And Daniel walks away clean because he was coerced, which is documented, which you already know. Hartwell was quiet for a long moment. You're very good, she said finally. I know, Lalisa said. That's why you wanted me in that chair. She and Daniel drove home in silence. Not an uncomfortable silence, a different kind. The kind that sits between two people who have just survived something together and don't yet have the language for it. The kind that needs to breathe before it can become words. They sat in the driveway for a while without going in. I should have told you the moment she approached me, he said. Yes, Lalisa said, you should have. I was trying to protect you. I know, she turned to look at him. I needed you to trust me, not protect me. There's a difference. He looked back at her. I know that now. She looked out at the quiet street, the bare November trees, the ordinary beautiful stillness of a life that had just narrowly survived being hollowed out from the inside. We're going to need to talk, she said. Really talk for a long time. I know, and it might not be okay for a while. I know that too. She sat with that, with the wreckage of the last 11 days, the cold precision of what she'd built and dismantled, the grief underneath the competence that she hadn't let herself feel yet because she hadn't had room for it while the work needed doing. She felt it now. Come inside, she said finally, and her voice was quieter than she intended. They went inside. The kitchen was still there, the olive oil on the counter, the clock on the wall, the ordinary architecture of a life she had built choice by choice and was not ready to surrender. 43 minutes of happiness, she had thought, gone in one message. But that wasn't quite right. Because the happiness hadn't been a lie. It had been the only thing in the entire operation that was completely, unmanageably real. And real things, she had learned in 7 years of working in rooms full of shadows, were the hardest things of all to destroy. She put the kettle on. She was not okay yet. But she was still standing. And in her line of work, still standing was everything. If this story gripped you, share IT. Subscribe for more. The next twist is always one message away.